What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review for you. And one I would say is, I would say pretty anticipated amongst its fans. This band has been around forever in one carnation or another. There's an interesting history with this band. Anyway, we're going over the latest offering from Massacre, Necrolution. This comes out on the 8th of November on Agonia Records. This band formed in 1984 in Tampa, Florida. This is only their fifth full-length overall. There's definitely a lot of EPs in there too. There's been a lot of reformations, breakups. They had, attempts at comeback albums in the past. I mean, Resurgence, which I went over in 2021, was kind of billed as a comeback album. I thought it was okay, but there was also a lot of shifting around the lineup before that one came out, namely like the entire lineup outside of Cam Lee ended up leaving the band and forming Inhuman Condition, which essentially just took Massacre's old logo and was like, guess what? It's ours now.
Right.
But I wasn't like the biggest fan of Resurgence, but a year later I checked out the Mythos EP and I thought it was pretty solid. But yeah, there's been a lot of ups and downs in this band's career. Like their debut, From Beyond, I think is awesome. A just true blue Tampa death metal staple. And then we have Promise, which followed it up, which is one of the worst groove metal albums I think I've ever heard. It's terrible. So yeah, I wouldn't say I have like a love-hate relationship with this band. I would just say I have a relationship with this band.
I was actually a late bloomer to this band. I didn't check them out until MDF 2022 because before we went, I was like, well, I better be familiar with these bands. So I'm familiar with the bands. I'm not standing there going, yeah, banging my head at the wrong parts. So I think I may have gotten into them at Resurgence, maybe in the Mythos EP. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at the timing, but I definitely listened to them. Now, I did listen to the first release, From Beyond, which I think is an amazing record. I haven't really gone too much farther past that until, I guess, this record now, so that's where I'm at.
So based on the, Mythos EP, I was actually kind of excited to go into this one. Cam has, retooled his lineup and definitely has some familiar faces. One that we just went over, Raga Johansson, once again showed up in a band that he wasn't in before, and he wanted to correct that because he needs to be in every band ever. But this also features Johnny Pedersen of Heads for the Dead, which I believe he ended up leaving just this year, and Heads for the Dead's drummer John Rudden. And looking at the title of the album, Necrolution, it almost implies some sort of evolution of sorts, and, well, not really. This kind of just sounds exactly like what you'd expect from Massacre. This is just flat out old school death metal, lots of thrashy riffs and more thrashy rhythms, groovy breakdowns. I mean, this is just built on riffs and Cam's just giant gurgly vocals. And, well, I mean, possibly because Raga's in the band, there's definitely a lot of stuff that you could draw connections to any number of bands he's in: House by the Cemetery, Revolting, Rip Spreader, Paganizer, and 35 other ones.
I mean, it's very straightforward once again, and not a lot of variance to the riffs. Like, they're good riffs, but that was my same thing for Paganizer too. I was like, they're decent, but meh.
While I would say this isn't as stripped down as the last Paganizer album, it is, again, like very meat and potatoes. Like, a lot of the songs kind of have a similar song structure. Like, right from the rip, Fear of the Unknown comes in with spooky melodies and like just stomping riffs, and then bam, you're off into like thrashy old school death metal. Cam starts gurgling utterances about Lovecraftian horror because that is the thing that he absolutely loves. Lots of stuff to compare to old school Cannibal Corpse, like definitely more of the Barnes age. Definitely some very obituary-esque moments, like Curse the Resonator, which just has those very just obituary style gloomy riffs.
Yep.
Like, the only thing it's missing is, Trevor Paris's just flat out swampy guitar tone.
Yeah, I mean, kind of lurching, stompy grooves are all over at least the beginning of that song, and really, that kind of happens a lot in this record. I think much like Paganizer, you get a lot of like creepy tremolo riffs, which are cool. They're great to hear, but oftentimes they lead into the same thing. They often lead into a D beat and a little bit thrashier of a riff, and that's kind of the well that this band drinks from, which, again, I mean, is great for them, and I like these things, but not 13 times in a row.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, a lot of the songs are short. Like, they kind of just get in, do their thing. Sometimes they come in, very strong and, have a lot of, fun riffs in them. Like, Ritual of the Abyss, Death May Die, I think was a pretty solid one. The Color Out of Space, the longest track in the album, and it's only 4 minutes and 30 seconds, but it has some like really solid, just nasty riffs on it, good creepy lead melodies. There's a lot of those used on the choruses too, to accentuate the fact that Cam is repeating the song title pretty often. Shriek of the Castle Freak, which hopefully that's a reference to that movie, because that movie is just disturbing as hell. It's a good D-beat, punky riffer. You got a lot of down-picked riffs. It's energetic, it's bombastic, and it's absolutely made for a live show, because there's like a call and response there where Cam said, "I said hey," and then there's a whole part where he just kind of like, I don't think anyone's really listening. "I said fucking hey," and then like, "Oh, hey, sorry, my bad." You got like some more like doomy, sinister, slow moments on here where it kind of lets the atmosphere creep out, and Cam gets away from doing like faster vocal cadences and really draws out his extra gurgly vocals on here. And it's pretty effective. Like, there's a good atmosphere created in that. But the way this is set up, I don't know, like there's a lot of repetition. And it's one of those things where even if you like what you're hearing, if it's being repeated, kind of endlessly, it gets a little bit old.
So old to the point where there's like a good stretch of, I'd say like 5 songs in a row that are all set up the same. From The Color of Space down to Dead Life Reanimator, it's really, really close to the same setup. And the one riff in the song is pretty much the one riff in the song. They only speed it up by employing things like D beats or an occasional a blast beat, but it's the same riff. That's why it's catchy.
And despite there being like minimal components to the songs, and having this kind of like straightforward like meat potatoes, again, delivery, something we have come to expect from anything that Raga is involved with, there are points on here where the transitions don't feel like they're fully hammered out, like Dead Life Reanimator, Shroud of Shadows, and the last track, The Final Hour. There's like some knee-jerk just transitions, like even before they give you time to like let that riff settle in, which generally they're pretty good about that on this album, like, because a lot of these riffs will repeat forever, and you might get a couple of riff changes, but overall they're going to stick to that main riff that kind of drew you in. Shroud of Shadows in particular opens up with what you think is going to be the main riff on it, and then it just takes this hard shift into like just thrashy machine gun riffs, and then another hard shift into a D beat on the chorus, and even that transition there just feels a little rocky, even though it's not like the most technical transition.
The last track, Ad Infinitum, The Final Hour, that track actually pissed me off because the beginning of it is slow and dark and evil and almost like Death Doom. Like, it's really, really good, and I was like, okay, here we go. They're going to give us this final song. This is going to be a banger. That song pissed me off for 3 reasons. The first reason is, at the beginning of the song, there's a clock chime. And albeit there's only 12 hours in a day, the clock chimes, I swear to God, 13, 14 times. It's really long. Then it goes into this doomy part, which I thought was fucking sweet. And then they sharply transition out of it into the same D beat and like just bouncy kind of stomp pattern that's in the rest of the record. And I was like, why? Why did you do that? That song had so much potential and you fucked it up.
Yeah, it kind of derailed the song. Like, you have slower, groovier moments on here. Ritual of the Abyss, Curse the Resonator. But again, they don't hang out long. And this one took it even slower. You have big droning riffs. The lead harmonies on there just sounded just evil as hell. And again, Cam drawing out his growls. Like, dude, this...
Gurgles.
Yeah, this sounded just gnarly. And then, it kind of just course-corrected for... I don't know, like, I don't really get the reason, because this could have been like a really good standout song. And then there's also issues with vocals or vocal timing. Like, Cam's delivery, he's got a solid roar. Like, it's just a good, just classic old school death metal roar. Like, I would say, like, at the time, like back in like, the late 80s and shit, like, he had probably like one of the most nasty growls, and he still has that, but there's a lot of reverb and a lot of doubling, and then like high screams, and I think there might be some backup vocals that come in. And with all that layering, I feel like at least on like some of the faster sections, which a good chunk of this is still very much rooted in like just thrashy old school death metal, there are issues with the cadences being a little bit off the beat. Like, sometimes they come in off the one, or sometimes they kind of lose it halfway through. And just because the vocals are so quick in those songs, and because they're like a quick succession of words, he doesn't get a chance to really enunciate them. And I feel like there are like moments where he just kind of loses the beat and then has to recover a little bit.
Faster vocal cadences aren't for everybody. I mean, you know, he's not Corpse Grinder or Ollie from Archspire. In fact, no one's that man. But I mean, you know, if elongated vocals and growls are your thing, you know, I can see why this might screw you up a little bit. But yeah, it happened at least 3 times that I could count in 3 different songs where it just kind of didn't feel like it was on the beat, or the drums felt a little off. I'm not really sure what was happening, but it's noticeable.
I mean, I think the drum sounded pretty much spot on throughout this. Like, it's just straightforward, like, you know, more up-tempo stuff, you know, some fun syncopation every now and then. Again, it's something that kind of fits the music. Like, you know, again, it's very riff-driven, old-school stuff. Like, they're not asking for, like, complicated drum patterns. They're just looking for drum patterns that will drive the songs. And, you know, for the most part, I would say they absolutely do that. But again, it's this, you know, rinse and repeat formula. Now, granted, it's heavy and riffy pretty much throughout, maybe minus the prologues, which... All right, I don't know why they're actually there, and I have a theory, but first I'm going to complain about them. Xenophobia, the first one, comes at the second track. Like, you just had one track to get settled in, and then you get an interlude, which this one, I mean, out of the 3 interludes on here, kind of does stand out a little bit with some, like, Middle Eastern flourishes and, you know, like, a very specific atmosphere, and it does lead into Ritual of the Abyss pretty well. But the other 2, Chasm and Zothic, that's... Zothic with an Xothic.
Very good.
Very made up word.
There's a Scrabble word for you if you like making up words.
They're just like stock spooky noises, especially Chasm. Chasm, it really didn't need to be on here. Like, it's just atmospheric noise. At least with Zothic, you know, it has this weird pulsating noise. It sounds like Cthulhu learned how to play the tuba and he's in a marching band. Like, yeah, no, this is what I do now.
I mean, you know, that's something to show off, I guess.
I mean, he's good at sleeping and then, you know, devouring the world when he's awake. So, you know, you got to have like a hobby in there too. But my theory with that, though, is just the way that this album is set up in terms of its pacing. I feel like, well, Xenophobia is in the wrong spot. It should have been like the opening track, I guess, if you're going to have an intro. But this feels like 3 different EPs. And honestly, EPs is kind of where they've been successful here lately. Like, Mythos I thought was really solid, and there's been like at least 2 or 3 other EPs in between Resurgence and this album. And with a shorter dose, I think this would stand out more. Like, I liked Mythos, and it really didn't do anything that different than what this album is doing, but it was a shorter listen, and it didn't hang out long enough for it to get, like, boring. It was kind of in and out. It did its old school death metal thing, and... you know, I actually enjoyed that. This, especially with the breaks in here, I feel like you have 3 different EPs that had intros to them too. And maybe as EPs, this might have stood out a little bit more. There's also the fact that, like, when it came down to, like, leads and such, it kind of changed modes about halfway through the album. Again, kind of lending to this, like, this might have been like 3 EPs combined. The first half of the album, you get a lot of those just dreary harmonies and, like, you know, dive bomb-ish kind of spooky leads that, you know, they're not technical, they're just there to enhance the atmosphere. But then later on the album, it kind of shifts away from those for the most part and starts throwing in like shreddy solos every now and then. Kind of a completely different feel. And the fact that one side is doing something completely different than the other side as far as like lead work, it again makes me feel like this is like 3 separate EPs.
And once again, sadly, kind of like Paganizer was, the songs didn't feel completely fleshed out, especially the ones that were covered wall to wall with transitions. The songs kind of moved more freely, oftentimes without direction. Songs like Ensnares Within, there's 7 transitions in that song, and they don't necessarily go a whole lot of places. And then you get down to things like Shroud of Shadows, albeit it's a little bit heavier of a song, it's still, every time it transitions from verse to chorus, you're just like, what? And the last track, which I can't stop bitching enough about because I again thought that track really had a lot of potential, it does it as well. So, like, at this point in the game, are you writing riffs just to write them?
I mean, again, that same argument in terms of, like, Raga's very just prolific nature in terms of all the bands he's in and probably joining as we speak. like there comes a point where some of it is starting to feel a little bit tired, like a little bit rote. And I get that, with his style of like old school death metal, there's not a lot of like, room to kind of move around within that subset without kind of like eventually like leaving it behind. But, when old school death metal is done really well and just like that meat and potato style, you can really feel it. And I feel that occasionally on here, but not throughout this entire album. And, as a 16-track album, granted, it's not particularly that long. It's only 46 minutes, but it feels really long because it feels like you've been listening to a lot of the same songs over and over again.
That was my gripe as well. Like, this does not need to be 16 tracks long, albeit 3 of them are kind of useless prologues, especially if you're not going to introduce different things into the songs. Like, verse, chorus, D-beat, shreddy part, okay, done. Like, I didn't need that 16 times.
So overall, I'm going to give this 2.5 stars. It's okay. Like, it does what old school death metal should do for the most part, but I do feel like it overstays its welcome in terms of just, adding different things as the adventure goes on. Like, I feel like I read this same Lovecraftian story over and over again. Props, though, for him bringing up The Color Out of Space, which I think is a really awesome story. But yeah, the songs, while they are energetic and they're heavy and they're loaded with like some solid riffs, it just gets a little bit old. If this was broken up into 3 EPs, I don't know, I might have ended up liking it a little bit more, but there's just, not enough on here in terms of variety to really keep it interesting. But still, if you enjoy bands like Obituary, Possessed, maybe a little bit of Malevolent Creation too, check it out, give it a whirl, who knows, you might really dig it.
I'm personally at a 2. Once again, it's an album filled full of decent riffs and kind of gross tremolos. It was creepy at times, and that was really cool, but it lost its luster fairly quickly for me. We were probably 3 or 4 songs in before I was like, all right, look, from song to song, I feel like I've heard all these songs before. And like, that was way too early for me to get to that realization. And as the record went on, I kind of wished that there was more to it. And while I got some glimpses of that, it was really transitioned out of fairly quickly and went back to the well. And I get it. This is fairly simple old school death metal, and that's fine. There's a lot of that out there, but I don't know. For me, it was just kind of like, meh. And the fact that it was really long. Once again, I don't need 13 songs. If you're going to do stuff like this, I agree with Nick. Split it up into some EPs. Maybe it got a little transition happy for me. And most of the songs, once again, much like, unfortunately, Paganizer did, it held on to these hooky riffs and melodies for the whole song. And I was just like, I've already been here. I'm good. So I'm at 2 stars. But yeah, if you're getting into things like, Paganizer, Inhuman Condition, a little bit of Cannibal Corpse, yeah, you're probably going to like this. I don't know. If you're a longtime Massacre fan, check it out just for the hell of it. Check it out because it's Massacre. But yeah, it's a 2 for me.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We also now offer memberships. They are only 99 cents, and we will eventually be doing some members-only live streams because that is the perk that I selected. We also have stupid emojis, namely the Booger Trolls. They are a pair now. They are a happy couple sharing an apartment that you would never want to visit. This is our new way of supporting the channel directly. We're trying to get away from Patreon and, again, StreamYard raising the prices. And yeah, I've said all that before, but yeah, this is, the new way to really help us out. We also still have our store, thrallsmetal.com. We have our t-shirts and hats and such. But yeah, if you would like to help out the channel in a way, the join button or the store, either way, we would appreciate it.
And of course, as always, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal. I know I say this all the time, but album reviews, discography rankings. And of course, we're going to be doing those live streams pretty soon as the end of the year is slowing down on releases, so it gives us more to do. So if you have joined thus far, don't fret. The live stream is happening really soon. Multiple discussion segments. There's going to be some things coming back around. We're excited. We keep doing all this stuff at Thralls of Metal, all for you guys. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for being a part of things. You guys, we're almost at 20,000 subscribers, which is absolutely mind-blowing. I never thought ever, once again, that we would get here, but here we are. We appreciate you. Thank you for your support.
Yeah, and because we are getting close to 20,000 subscribers, I will be doing a giveaway of sorts. I'm still rounding up enough stuff for that, but yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and thank you guys so much for every bit of support you guys give us. So one more big thank you because of how awesome you guys are, and it's a lot, and we will catch you later.